latest episode of the Kansas Moonshot Podcast, where we are shining the spotlight on amazing things happening in schools across the state. Whether you're one of the Mercury, Gemini, or Apollo schools launching some amazing redesign plans, or a teacher trying to do something a little different, I want to share your story. The goal is to celebrate the awesomeness all around us. Last week I had the opportunity to share with some of the educators in Sabetha, Kansas, all about our redesign process. They are already trying out some innovations in their classrooms as well, and I walked away with a few strategies I want to bring back to my own classroom. So shout out to everyone in Sabetha, Kansas. Now, this episode of the podcast is not really scripted out like I normally do. I have a couple of interviews in the works. This week I'm going to be talking with two different schools who are implementing the Summit Learning Platform to hear from them on how it's going and hear some of the pros and cons, some of the things that are going well, some of the things they're struggling with. And I'm also working on getting an interview with the people from Summit Learning as well, just to learn about that personalized learning experience that some of the schools that are in this redesign process are going through. But that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So to be honest, I'm a teacher and I'm working on a teacher schedule. And so getting lined up with educators across the state has been a little bit of a challenge. And I knew that going into this podcast. And I knew that I would try to pull in things from anywhere I can to try to benefit you and help you hear some of the stories that are going on. But honestly, I don't have an interview this week. So I'm going to show you a little bit about what's been going on at Santa Fe Trail in my own classroom. Because now that it's second semester, we've started picking up on getting more tours of our building. And it is a little intimidating that first couple of times that an educator walks in to sit down and observe your class. Because you know the second they sit down, you start side-eyeing those kids that, they're great kids, but they have those moments when they don't always follow the rules. I mean, they're still middle school kids. And sometimes they don't do what they're supposed to do. And so you've got your fingers crossed in your head. You're saying, okay, be awesome today. I know you can do it. I know you can do it. Come on, let's have a good day. Please, there's people watching. And there may be a kid who does something they're not supposed to, or they're whispering to their neighbor, and every single thing seems to get magnified. And you're just horrified anytime something doesn't go exactly the way it's supposed to. Or I had a couple of times where people were observing and my kids were just doing free choice reading. And I was like, oh no, they're supposed to be seeing something redesigned and amazing, and all they're doing is reading. But then I have to refocus and realize it's not about anyone else. It's about those kids. And that moment when they were free reading is the best thing for them at that moment. The reality is sometimes kids don't follow directions. And so for someone to come tour the building and see, hey, these kids are just like my own kids back at school. Hopefully that's something that is reassuring, if anything, that we may be doing these new changes to our schedule and redesigning what we're offering to students and how we're offering it to students. But the adolescent brain has still a long way to go and a long way to grow. That doesn't change. And so hopefully if you've come and observed in our classes, you see that we have amazing students who are still middle school kids, and they act like middle school kids sometimes. And I'm okay with that. Now, one thing I do want to change, and one thing that I'm going to try out this quarter, I got the idea from a few podcasts I listened to, and I really wish I could remember whose podcast it was on so I could give them credit. But they have a greeter every time a guest is in the room. And I want to set that up. So that's one goal I have for myself, is to set up some sort of greeter so that anytime a guest is in the room, first thing they do is they go over and introduce themselves and welcome them to the classroom, and then go back to whatever it is they're working on. So this is kind of a work in progress. And as I'm talking through it right now on this podcast, live and in person on this microphone, I'm wrestling with it. And that's what this redesign is all about. It's wrestling with these ideas that you have and trying them out and seeing what works and what doesn't. On an unrelated note, I am piloting some portfolios for my school. My team, my students are piloting some different portfolio ideas. Second quarter, we did Google Slides portfolios where every student put together their best writing, the books that they're working on, reading, how many books they ranked them for first semester, and they put them all together in a Google Slides presentation that they could then share with their parents. Now, it was cool. It was amazing to get all of that combined into one document, but it wasn't as easily accessible as I would like for a portfolio. So the next step in this portfolio process is we're going to try out a couple of different programs. First, we're going to try out Weebly. I have a few students who are going to be using that. It is more user-friendly on the iPads, which were one-to-one iPads. So they're going to be using Weebly on the iPads. They're going to create a portfolio website with a tab for each class, and we're still working out the details of what it will look like. I'm going to have another group, the group that wants a challenge, and they're going to use Google Sites. And then we're going to kind of compare notes and see, is Google Sites or Weebly better for these student portfolios? The students really like the idea of helping decide what the whole school is going to do once they get finished with their portfolios. And then the group of students, I have permission slips going home to parents. And I know I've got a few students whose parents, they're not quite ready for their child to put their work online in an open website. I can understand that. And so those students will still be creating another Google Slides presentation portfolio. It's still accessible to people, but just not as accessible as like a website would be. So that's where I'm at in my classroom. I'm trying some new and different things as far as offering more free choice reading options. We're not doing very many whole class novels as I've done in the past. But those are just a couple of changes that we're making. And that is all I've got for you for this episode of the Kansas Moonshot Podcast. Next week, like I said, we're going to have an interview with one of the schools that's going through the Summit Learning Platform. I'm also continuing to look for schools that would like to share what's going on at their school. Good or bad. Share some of the things that you guys are trying out. Please reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter at teachlikeaninja@gmail.com. I'm sorry, that's my email. You can find me on Twitter at teachlikeaninja. And that's it for this episode. For more information, you can check out my website, mrstockrocks.com. If you know someone, like I said, who's doing something really great in their classroom or is going through some sort of redesign process, let me know about it, and I would love to set up a time to interview them for the show. Because the more we can hear from other schools across the state, the better collectively we will all get. And the way we will all grow is by hearing these ideas from other schools. Hopefully, this hasn't been too much of a rambling podcast. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for just sharing this podcast out. I've had a couple of people that I've met that have said, hey, I heard your podcast. And for someone who just put this podcast together on a whim thinking maybe people would want to listen to it, that's amazing to hear. If any of you are going to the MACE conference, the MACE conference is at the end of February. If any of you will be at the MACE conference, I look forward to meeting you there. I will be there. I'm doing a couple of sessions, one on telling your story, talking about how we're using social media to promote some of the things we're working on, and also forming a podcast. I've formed 2 podcasts so far, and I'm working on trying to put together a student podcast in the near future. I'll be sharing that at the MACE conference, and then the other session is all about how we introduce student choice through the redesign process. So, like I said, if you're at MACE, check me out. I'd love to talk to you, meet you, say hi. I'll have stickers because, obviously, who doesn't love a good sticker? That is it for this episode of the podcast. I've been your host, Josh Stock, 6th grade language arts teacher and self-proclaimed awesomeness expert. Until next time, book it forward and be awesome.